Okay, so now we're going to talk about control phenomena that exist in language, which required us to think about how we're going to annotate frame elements that are conceptually present, but not necessarily within the maximal projection of the target LU. So sometimes the syntax dictates what else FrameNet lexicographers annotate, even when it's outside the maximal projection of the target lexical unit. And here are some of the phenomena that meet that criterion, and we're going to look at now. These are only some. To have a full understanding of all possibilities, I would suggest first getting a handle on these, making sure that you understand these and how we implement our annotation criteria with these, and then go on to look in the book for some of the others. But as with annotation in general, I think first understanding and practicing with the bigger ones, if you will, the more basic ones, will put you in a good position to understand and work with some of the more subtle and detailed ones. So we have the following situations. The target could be the complement of a control verb. It could be a complement of what we call a support verb. It could be the complement of a control noun. It could be, the target could be in a sentence modifier. Or it could be a conjunct. That is, it could be one of the two pieces of linguistic material in a conjunction. So in all of these situations, FrameNet annotates non-local constituents of the target LU. So the first one that we'll talk about is when the target is a complement of a control verb. And here are a couple of examples. And the annotation layers that we'll discuss are frame element and grammatical function. Phrase type, I think, is pretty easy to figure out, right? So I'm limiting my discussion to frame element annotation and grammatical function annotation. First example, we expect Branca to retaliate for the insult. Manuel seems to have avenged his brother's death. Our target words, our target lexical units are, again, from the revenge frame, retaliate in the first sentence, and avenge in the second sentence. And we see that the frame element avenger, which we want to annotate, is actually outside the maximal projection of the target, right? And this is how we annotate it. Even though it's outside the maximal projection of the lexical unit. The properties of the control verb determine that one of its arguments is an argument of the target, right? Because of the way the verb expected works, the frame element avenger for the target retaliate is the object of the control verb, right? So with the verb expect, in this example, the object of the control verb is the frame element of our target word, right? And with, in the second sentence, with the verb, with the control verb seem, the subject of the control verb is the frame element avenger for the target lexical unit avenge. In both cases, the frame element avenger instantiated with a constituent that's an argument of the control verb. In both cases, we use the grammatical function external, right? So I hope that these two examples begin to give you an idea of why we use external as opposed to subject, right? Because in the first sentence, it's true that Branca is the subject of retaliate, but in terms of the syntax of the sentence, it's the object of the verb that controls it, right? And the same is true of Manuel as avenger, right? It's the subject of the verb that controls the target LU, the target lexical unit. Okay, is that clear? So here's more about the maximal projection principle. Let's say the target is a complement of a support verb. And here are some examples of support verbs. Or here are some examples of sentences which have support verbs. Juan said a prayer for me. The dean made a decision about funding. Rona gave her friend advice. Each of the words highlighted in each of these sentences we would call a support verb. So more generally, here are more examples of support verbs. Make, as in make a decision or make a statement. Notice that make a decision is the same as decide, and make a statement communicates the same information as state. So what we say then is that the support verb make, as in make a decision, make a statement, make a mistake, is semantically neutral. It doesn't carry the semantic information of the whole expression. Likewise, let's take give for another example. To give counsel is to counsel. To give advice is to advise. Okay, so let's talk a little more generally about support verbs. Can we stop for a minute? I want to stop for a minute. The noise. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk a little more generally about support verbs. I already said that they're semantically neutral. That is, they don't add information to the noun that they govern. They take an event or a state noun and turn it into a verb phrase like predicate. So, for example, take revenge is the same thing as, means the same thing as revenge, right? So English provides another way of articulating the concept of revenge. But in terms of what's going on in the scene, in terms of the event, there is no difference in meaning whether you take revenge or revenge. They allow for the expression of frame element as subject, and that's the relevant part here, right? So strictly speaking, the subject of the support verb is outside of the maximal projection of the target's lexical unit. But FrameNet made the decision to annotate those subjects as subjects of the target lexical unit precisely because they provide information about the participants in the scene. Let's look at a couple of examples. Lucy revenged her being insulted would be just with the verb. An example just with the verb, no support verb. Comparable examples using a support verb are Lucy took revenge on Ella for the insult. Lucy exacted revenge from Ella for the insult. In both cases, Lucy, the syntactic subject of the support verb, is the semantic subject, if you will, of the target noun, revenge. This is how we would annotate these sentences. Lucy is the avenger. We indicate that it is the external It has the grammatical function of external. We also indicate that the phrase took revenge is a support verb plus a noun. So we mark support on the verb and revenge on the target, and noun on the target lexical unit, right? Now, in the FrameNet desktop, you would see that we have a different layer for recording information about support verbs and their nouns, right? Our primary focus, both in FrameNet as well as for these lectures, is the triple of information in the frame element, the grammatical function, and the phrase type. Unless a FrameNet lexicographer asks to see the layer on which to annotate support for support verb, it doesn't automatically show. We record that information precisely because we want to know what support verbs are in relation to, what support verbs have a relation to the frame element that instantiates the, in this case, the avenger for the event noun, right? We record that information because it's about the scene. If we don't record that information, we've left out something crucial about the fillers of the semantic roles, right? And I don't think anybody would imagine that these sentences are examples of any kind of null instantiation. There is linguistic material right there, right? It would be extreme, I think, to imagine that this is definite null instantiation. It's just, you know, it's just in the, it's in the sentence, but it's not in the maximal projection of the target. Okay, so the syntactic subject of the support verb, as we've seen in these example annotations, instantiates the semantic role of the noun target, and the frame element has the grammatical function external. Let's go on. What if the target is a complement of a control noun? As in the example, an attempt at avenging her brother's death angered her mother. So control nouns govern their targets, right? It's Anna. Not only is Anna doing the attempting, she's doing the avenging, right? So the frame-evoking noun, the noun under consideration, the one for which we're providing the frame semantic annotation, has an external argument of its own that's not within the maximal projection. And this is what that annotation would look like. Anna is marked as avenger, and external grammatical function. Notice that I added DNI, offender, and INI to this annotation, beginning, I hope, to show you that there's a lot of information provided in a single annotation. Sometimes I illustrate a phenomenon with a sentence and only focus on that phenomenon. And now I've incorporated both information about control and information about null instantiation into this example sentence. FrameNet, the FrameNet database has a lot of semantic information, some of which we've already discussed, some of which we will discuss, and undoubtedly some we won't have time to discuss. Okay. What if a target is a sentence modifier? And I'm looking at my slides and I realize they're out of order. So let's go ahead to slide number 41. I don't know if you have the numbers. So advance until you see. So here's an example of the target as a gerund modifier of the sentence, right? So the target is in a modification phrase in the sentence, right? And it's another example of the maximal projection of the target not giving us any linguistic material to annotate. So FrameNet made the decision to go beyond the maximal projection of the target in this case. Remember, we're annotating for shopping, right? Which is modifying, which is part of the modifying phrase of the sentence. The subject, or the linguistic material that fills the subject position, if you will, of shopping is, I just named the, I don't know if we have this, I named it shopper, assuming that that works. So even though Juanita is not in the maximal projection of the modifying expression, we nevertheless annotate that linguistic material as the frame element that instantiates the frame element of shopping. That was a complicated sentence. Okay, so Juanita is the shopper doing the shopping, even though the noun Juanita is not part of the maximal projection of the target. Okay, so we're going to have to go back several slides to look at, so that was the sentence modifier example. Now we're going to look at when the target itself is a conjunct. Imagine the sentence, the storekeeper bought and sold decorative Japanese umbrellas, right? Our target is bought. Under these, with bought as the target, I think it's perfectly obvious that the storekeeper is the buyer, right? But what if my target, and we would, yeah, what if my target is sold? Okay? The storekeeper is the seller, right? So we want to include that information. Here's an example of a sentence that FrameNet could make use of in two different frames. As it happens, the rest of the annotation is pretty straightforward, right? We don't annotate, we don't choose the conjunct as the entire conjunct as the target. We choose pieces of the conjunct and annotate with respect to that one piece of the conjunct at a time. So we see that the noun phrase, the storekeeper, depending on whose perspective we're taking, could either be the buyer or the seller. Okay? So we did this, and now I think we still have a little time to do an in-class exercise. Yes, great. The first exercise is to provide the frame elements for these, to annotate each of these sentences, providing the frame elements for the revenge frame. For the first sentence, he objected to Carla's vengeance on the girls. And in the second, it's an example of attaching. Marta attached the poster to the wall. So take, I would say, 5 minutes. And if you have any questions, Thiago and I will be there for you.